And I'm actually going to do an audible here and realize, because there's just a very natural segue here of what to talk about next. Because talking about, like, is there something we're missing? There was also some news out of UiPath that likewise I found myself scratching my head going, what are we missing here? So I don't know if you want to cue that one up.
Yeah, there's an interesting announcement last week from UiPath, the robotic process automation market leader, where their CEO, Rob Enslin, unexpectedly stepped down and was immediately replaced by their founder, Daniel Dines. So obviously, this disruption was not taken well by the stock market as the stock fell 40%. But this is also a situation where UiPath is starting to run out of runway in terms of its projected growth. The robotic process automation market had its moment, but it seems to be reaching the end of its moment right now, and they're not quite sure what to do next. But I'm not sure that replacing the CEO immediately was the right move.
Well, I mean, to me, the entire thing was shocking and stunk. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it actually reflects much worse on Dines than um, than it does on um, uh, Enslin, insofar as what the part that you left out, I guess, is that they were co-CEOs for I think 2 or 3 years, right? I mean, this pretty long stretch of period, and he only became the sole CEO 3 months ago, 4 months ago. And so the issues that they supposedly are talking about, the fact that numbers are down and what, that doesn't happen in a quarter, right? So clearly all that stuff happened when they were co-CEOs. And one of the reasons you do a whole I'm not a fan of co-CEOs, but the whole reason you do it is this idea that you can kind of split duties and you can kind of test the waters, so that exactly what happened, right? The one of them then leaves and you have one person left, and then it's sort of this transition of power. And so the fact that 4 months afterward they're unseating him, because there's no way you're going to make me believe he's leaving just because he decided to retire after 4 months as the sole CEO. This is clearly a removal, and it just made no sense. I mean, the press release that they put out was just hilarious, because it made it sound like he was retiring, that he just decided he was time to go on, and it's just like, clearly that's not the case. But it just speaks, and I think the reason the stock drop is it just speaks to the disarray you're talking about. Not only to, I think, the industry, the RPA space as a whole, which is really struggling to adapt. But I think UiPath in particular is struggling to adapt. I think, like, you look at what Automation Anywhere is doing, and I think they have a much better grasp on a path forward. And I think UiPath is really struggling to find continued relevance in the space. And so I think you're seeing this play out. And I think that's really what the stock drop is representing.
Yes, like oddly enough, there are connections between this RPA story and the learning platform story that we had, in that both are seen as dying markets. Whereas I think there's actually a lot of logic there that needs to be built into the next generation of AI. The robotic process automation that has been built out has a lot of interesting and rules-based logic that defines businesses. And in theory, we have hundreds of thousands of these rules that can now be used to double check AI. That could be a big strength for somebody who actually figures out that we still have rules in the world, and we should look at some of those rules that have been well defined over the decades from a policy and governance perspective to make things work, instead of just assuming AI, and just wave your hands and hope that everything works out. But that doesn't seem to
Yeah, no,
be the case with UiPath. Yeah.
well, no, I think, I mean, UiPath aside, I do think the RPA space, I've been pretty bearish on it for, much like what you said. I've probably been one of the people saying RPA is a dying space. And I'm still fairly bearish on it overall, but I agree with you. I'm beginning to take a much broader look, right? If we look at the broader space of workflow automation, um, you have companies like ServiceNow, which, by the way, has an RPA play. And you start recognizing that if I stop, I think RPA's problem was always that it was so narrow banded. It was focusing on this very specific sort of screenscaping modality that they've been trying to break out of. But that's really where it was rooted. But it was also rooted in a very real problem that most enterprises had this very old technology that you couldn't automate in any other way. You couldn't use APIs. You couldn't do the more normal approaches. But what I think is interesting is we're in this hybrid era where increasingly organizations are looking at those and say, "Hey, am I getting any real value? Do I have a compelling business reason to change?" And if the answer is no, then I'm still going to use something like RPA to automate that. Now, if I can make that RPA less fragile, more intelligent by infusing AI into it, to your point, that just makes it better. And it now allows it to live in this broader workflow and automation ecosystem. And that's where I think it's going to land. I think the challenge that the RPA vendors have, the pure play RPA vendors, is that they are now one small tool in a very large tool chest full of automation tools. And so the question that anybody has to ask is, do I want to make this huge investment in this one platform that does this narrow thing, or am I looking at a larger platform that can do a whole bunch of things, including that? And I think we're increasingly seeing organizations making that choice. So I think it's indicative of sort of the challenges that are going on. It's also indicative of, I just think, really, I mean, like I said, I think this reflects very poorly on UiPath's board. And they're just floundering, and it's going to create an opportunity for others to sort of step in.